Science is organized knowledge. Wisdom is organized life. We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, therefore, is not an act, but a habit. Education is a progressive discovery of our own ignorance. To speak ill of others is a dishonest way of praising ourselves. Let us be above such transparent egotism. How much more suffering is caused by the thought of death than by death itself? Tolerance grows only when faith loses certainty. Certainty is murderous. 60 years ago I knew everything. Now I know nothing. Education is a progressive discovery of our own ignorance. Forget mistakes. Forget failure. Forget everything except what you're going to do now and do it. Today is your lucky day. Civilization exists by geological consent, subject to change without notice. The greatest question of our time is not communism versus individualism, not Europe versus America, not even the East versus the West. It is whether men can bear to live without God. When liberty exceeds intelligence, it begets chaos, which begets dictatorship. So the story of man runs in a dreary circle, because he is not yet master of the earth that holds him. Every science begins as philosophy and ends as art. It arises in hypothesis and flows into achievement. The trouble with most people is that they think with their hopes or fears or wishes rather than with their minds. Rome remained great as long as she had enemies who forced her to unity, vision, and heroism. When she had overcome them all, she flourished for a moment and then began to die. History reports that the men who can manage men manage the men who can manage only things, and the men who can manage money manage all. In philosophy, as in politics, the longest distance between 2 points is a straight line. You can't fool all the people all the time, but you can fool enough of them to rule a large country. In the end, nothing is lost. Every event, for good or evil, has effects forever. Nature smiles at the union of freedom and equality in our utopias. For freedom and equality are sworn and everlasting enemies, and when one prevails the other dies. History is an excellent teacher with few pupils. If we rated greatness by the influence of the great, we will say, Muhammad is the greatest of the great in history. To rulers, religion, like almost everything else, is a tool of power. A great civilization is not conquered from without until it has destroyed itself within. Read, think well of mankind, go to our libraries and rejoice. By and large, the poor have the same impulses as the rich, with only less opportunity or skill to implement them. The older Romans used temples as their banks, as we use banks as our temples. One of the lessons of history is that the gods can be silent in many languages. History is mostly guessing, the rest is prejudice. Our knowledge is a receding mirage in an expanding desert of ignorance. Nature has never read the Declaration of Independence. It continues to make us unequal. Most history is guessing, and the rest is prejudice. The present is the past rolled up for action, and the past is the present unrolled for understanding. But now and then liberty, in the slogans of the strong, means freedom from restraint in the exploitation of the weak. Truth always originates in a minority of one, and every custom begins as a broken precedent. Facts replaced understanding, and knowledge, split into 1,000 isolated fragments, no longer generated wisdom. This is the tragedy of almost every civilization, that its soul is in its faith, and seldom survives philosophy. Philosophy begins when one learns to doubt, particularly to doubt one's cherished beliefs, one's dogmas and one's axioms. The form of Christianity that developed in Europe and later spread to America and the rest of the world was the last great creation of the ancient pagan world. In its youth a people produced mythology and poetry. In its decadence, philosophy and logic. To say nothing, especially when speaking, is half the art of diplomacy. When a man is interested in the past he writes history. When he is interested in the future he makes it. Not to be occupied, and not to exist, amount to the same thing, he said. All people are good except those who are idle. If you look at a map of Europe you will observe that Greece is a skeleton-like hand stretching its crooked fingers out into the Mediterranean Sea. But he had gained a perspective of thought in which every extreme was seen as a half-truth. There his chief enterprises are reading and doing nothing. Animals eat one another without qualm. Civilized men consume one another by due process of law. Cooperation. He is his own best friend, and takes delight in privacy, whereas the man of no virtue or ability is his own worst enemy, and is afraid of solitude. 59 Such. Radicalism is a luxury of stability. We may dare to change things only when things lie steady under our hands.